Welcome to the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4. Round 1. Fight.
We start where my love of the Tekken series began, with Tekken 4. You see, I know there's the first three games. And we'll incorporate what's necessary from them. But I'm skipping those for now to focus on where my own personal experience with Tekken began, with this game. You see, context. I grew up with Super Street Fighter 2, and that was a lot of fun. Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, which, mixed, but I kind of liked it. And Killer Instinct, which was a blast, all on the Super Nintendo. And see, I was stuck with the Sega Genesis, a Nintendo, like an NES, and a Super Nintendo, being my only consoles all the way until 2003, when I got my N64. Then in 2004, I bought my own PS1, very briefly, before getting a PS2 for my birthday on May 11th of 2004, my 15th birthday. I loaded up Tekken 4 and was greeted with this opening. I didn't quite know how to take that opening. The jazz was cheesy, the intro gimmick. I remember finding Christie Monteiro hot as hell at the time, and the announcer, oh my god, the announcer. They should have kept him around, because that announcer is amazing. He has this sort of cool, kind of eases you into it, And the thing is, I had asked my mom for a PS2 and Tekken 3 for my birthday, because I'd not even known there was a Tekken on PS2 at the time. Remember, the internet was still very early in those days, and it was hard to even know what games did or didn't exist at the time. Hell, I had a tiny library of games for each system until PS2, when I could finally have enough allowance to buy my own games, so I'd usually buy them for $30 used at the time. The concept of a $50 US dollar game sounded too expensive to me at the time. So it wasn't until Tekken 5 that I even bothered to pay such a high price for a video game of $50. Boy, how times have changed. Anyway, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I remember later getting a game magazine of GamePro, this one, and saying all about Tekken 4 and me being so happy to own it, and that showed me the contrast that this game I owned had with other games in the series, such as Uneven Terrain. The characters like Marduk, Steve Fox, and Christie, those were new characters to the series. Marduk, who's a bit more of like a grappler. He says Vale Tudo, but that's a form of mixed martial arts, and at the end of the day, he ended up basically being just a wrestler. Steve Fox, the boxing champion, who had a bit of a weird thing on his arm, which never really got elaborated on, all veiny and shit. And Christie Monteiro, the slut. I mean capoeira master. Yeah. So, the limb-based approach made me wonder why all fighting games didn't do the same. Like left punch, right punch, left kick, and right kick are mapped to the face buttons. And that novelty just felt like a necessity once I played Tekken. I could never look at any other fighting game the same way again. I did ultimately decide my second favorite fighting game series after Tekken was Bloody Roar. That's part of a story for another video yet again someday. As for Tekken 4, I initially played as Christie a whole lot. And what can I say? I was a horny teenager. And her gameplay style was fluid, fun, and really connected with me. But I remember what really sold me was Jin. It felt so much simpler than all the other characters in Tekken 4. His moves just made sense to me. No fancy movements like the rest of the roster, just his punches and kicks felt like they did exactly what you'd expect them to do. So naturally, I played the hell out of that character in Tekken 4, and he remained one of my two mains for the rest of the series. The other one was Li Xiaolan. I remember he was an elegant and sophisticated person who used rapid series of kicks that just made me feel fast and powerful. He had a lot of lows, and he tended to be more about, come on over here, come here, boom, gotcha. But ultimately, something always pushed me back to Jin at the time, and I didn't truly start to switch back and forth between Jin and Lee until the later games after Tekken 4. So, with these videos, I'm mainly focusing on my own experience and feeling with the series, as well as the stories. You see, you can find plenty of people doing competitive Tekken videos, talking about the deeper intricacies of the series. But you know what I always had? People laughing at me and mocking me for caring about the story and the lore and the characters from that perspective of the series. They'd say, if you want that, play an RPG. But, as some of you know, I hate turn-based combat, and even action RPGs of that era were very limited in what I could do. I had to choose to play Devil May Cry, which angered me because it was too hard and didn't have the type of story I was looking for. Or a JRPG with turn-based combat, which I hated. Or get only sort of what I wanted with an action RPG, but ultimately get lost and not know where to go or what to do. But really, that all defeated the whole point. My love for Tekken 4 began with the story. Sure, the gameplay of the series is what kept me addicted, and we'll cover that to some extent where necessary. But this is primarily about the story, the lore, and my own experiences with the Tekken series. Starting with Tekken 4. I'll say, by the way, that going back to this game is really, really rough. I was obsessed with this game back in the day, but after the vast improvements to gameplay that the other games have, it's hard and it's painful to go back to this game. To say the gameplay has aged poorly is an understatement. Yet, the biggest thing Tekken 4 has going for it is that it has the best story and atmosphere of the entire series up until, well, arguably Tekken 8. I care about stories in a fighting game, despite people mocking me for it, and that's a big part of why I'm making these videos. In truth, another part of what inspired me to make these videos is how angry I am about Heihachi being back in Tekken 8. Otherwise, I'd mostly say I love the story of Tekken 8, but again, that's a video for later. One thing I can say for Tekken 4 is this: the music. This series has music that made me smile to this day, and any Tekken game that will allow it. This game's music and Tekken 5's music are the ones I use again and again for later Tekken games. I can't help it. This was the peak of the OST of Tekken in my opinion. 6 was still pretty good, Tag 2 was some awful dubstep, 7 was better, and 8 definitely has some memorable tracks, but here we are. I would say the beach theme is very upbeat and fun. Then you have the forest theme, which kind of gives you a sort of feeling like you're in a sort of wild area. And honestly, we could go on, but I'll just let the music speak for itself as we go. Alright, let's start with Kazuya's ending.
20 years ago, Kazuya lost to Heihachi and was thrown into the mouth of a volcano. A few days later, he was brought back to life by G Corporation, a biotech firm making revolutionary advances in the field of biogenetics research. With G Corporation's aid, Kazuya investigated the biomechanics of the devil gene within him by subjecting himself to various experiments. Kazuya believed that once he unlocked and controlled the power of the devil gene, he would be powerful enough to defeat Heihachi and destroy the Mishima Zaibatsu. 20 years later, the Tekken forces attacked G Corporation's facility and stole their research data. Kazuya was also targeted in the attack. Kazuya was infuriated by Heihachi's interference once again. He was determined more than ever to exact his vengeance. Kazuya was not fooled by the sudden announcement of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4. He knew that it was a trap orchestrated by Heihachi to lure him out. Despite this knowledge, Kazuya enters the tournament. This is his chance to defeat Heihachi.
貴様らがデビルと呼ぶ存在。20年前貴様に殺されかけた時に分離した我が半身をこやつから取り戻す。今こそ我が復活の時。おかげで手間一つ省けた。褒美に我が力を味わわせてやろう。どうした貴様らの科学で我を研究し尽くしたのではないのか。なぜ変わらぬ。風間とやらの力。風が貴様、なぜ。まさか。なるほど。力の統合にこんな手もあったとは。貴様の出番もここまでだ。俺の中で解 けてゆくがいい。あとは貴様を殺せば全て俺のものだ。目覚めろ風間陣。ついに全てを手に入れたぞ。
This ending says little and gets straight to the point. Kazuya beats everyone and it's whatever. The only aspect that I believe to remain canon from it is a very cool one, admittedly, where Kazuya dominates the devil within, and combines its power with Kazuya, merging the two, but with Kazuya in full control. He completely wiped his devil's will away and became the new Kazuya. This is something that I feel really contrasts well with Jin's struggles and his hatred for the devil gene. Meanwhile, Kazuya does more than embrace it. He dominates it. And that to me speaks about the differences between these characters a whole lot, as Kazuya and the devil gene merge into essentially a new being, a new Kazuya.
Brisbane, Australia, a city crowded with buildings, new and old. Nestled amongst the towering buildings was a small dojo. A young man trained there in silence, his face hidden by the hood of his jacket. Day after day, Jin trained in the traditional art of karate. Ever since his betrayal by Heihachi, Jin loathed anything related to the Mishimas, his lineage, his fighting style, the devil gene in his blood, everything. Thanks to the dojo master's training, Jin unlearned the Mishima fighting style and mastered the art of traditional karate. Jin burned with desire to destroy the evil Mishima bloodline, his grandfather, Heihachi Mishima, and his father, Kazuya. Upon hearing rumors of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4, Jin hardened his resolve to enter the tournament.
所詮この程度の男か。不甲斐ない。その力わしが全てもらう。お前はここで死ね。
風間淳に感謝しろ。
Now, Jin despises his family, the Devil Gene, all of them. And who can blame him? Heihachi betrayed him and shot him at the end of Tekken 3. And Kazuya, the man is just as evil, arguably more so evil. And yes, I am calling Heihachi evil. We'll get to Tekken 7 later, but Heihachi's evil. So every bit of emotion that Jin is feeling is both justified and understandable. This is the canon ending, as Jin just lays the smackdown on Kazuya and Heihachi both in this ending. But then the last moment, the epic moment with the Kazuya Devil Gene. But then at the last moment, the epic moment with his wings out and the Kazama Devil Gene reaction on his skin forming that crest. And then it's ultimately a memory of his mother, June, that prevents him from finishing Heihachi off. And he just flies away. At this time, the Mishima feud is still newer for me, and it's a promise that this will have to be resolved later, once and for all. But for now, these beautiful cutscenes, awesome atmosphere, and engaging storyline is what draws you into the Tekken series. It makes you want to know what will happen next. The story and lore brought me in, and the fun gameplay, which at the time I enjoyed the gameplay of 4 as well, is what kept me playing again and again. But yes, this gen ending and all of its contents is entirely canon. You're likely seeing a pattern, that parts of Kazuya's ending and Heihachi's ending connected to it, giving us a rough idea of what really happened in the events of this game, while also giving previews into what could have happened for Kazuya and Heihachi. Now Heihachi's intro and ending.
2 years ago, Heihachi failed to capture Ogre, but his researchers succeeded in collecting samples of its blood and tissue. These in turn were used in an attempt to create a new life form by combining Heihachi's and Ogre's genetic material. The experiment failed, however, and Heihachi learned that he lacked the Devil Gene necessary to integrate Ogre's genome with his own. In order to obtain the Devil Gene, Heihachi searched for Jin, who had transformed into a devil during the last tournament. During his search, Heihachi learned that the body of his son, Kazuya, whom he killed 20 years ago, was stored at a cutting-edge biotech firm called G Corporation. Heihachi ordered his Tekken force to raid G Corporation in an attempt to obtain Kazuya's remains. However, the mission ended in failure when Kazuya, revived by G Corporation, retaliated. In order to create a new life form, Heihachi needed the body of Kazuya or Jin, both of whom carried the Devil Gene. After much deliberation, an evil smile spread across Heihachi's lips. The next day, the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4 was announced.
の鎖は貴様らの力を無力化させる効果がある。貴様ほどデビル遺伝子に深く侵されたものならば数分で意識を失う。これで全ての駒が我が元に揃った。貴様たちもわしの役に立って死ねることに感謝しろ。
Age of Darkness? Now, if this doesn't show Heihachi as indisputably evil, I don't know what does. He's a villain. He's a man who wishes to dominate the world and crush all who oppose him. He threw Kazuya off of a cliff as a child just to see if he was strong enough to lead the clan. That was the reason at the time, remember? Yeah. And while the Heihachi diaper, as I often call this outfit, made Heihachi not so threatening nor imposing, kind of a joke, in this particular game, I felt he had his place in this game, and in later games, the character would grow on me significantly. Now we get to the part of the game that has the storyline I valued arguably the very most in this game, despite none of these characters being my main. The storyline between Steve Fox, Nina Williams, and Lei Wulong to a lesser extent. The fact the story gets fumbled very hard in the later games still angers me to this day. But here in Tekken 4, it's when the stories needed to get firmly planted, and I became very intrigued and eager to see what would happen in Tekken 5 for all of this. Boy, if only I knew. But I digress.
After the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2, the Mishima Zaibatsu used Nina as a test subject for experimental cryogenics research. 15 years later, Nina was released from cryosleep to fight in the third tournament. She fought in the tournament while suffering from cryosleep-induced amnesia. Since then, Nina escaped from the reaches of the Mishima Zaibatsu and spent her days carrying out missions as a contract assassin. To this day, she has been unable to regain memories of Anna or her previous life. Without memories or anyone to rely on, the only thing she could do was to execute her contracts for money. One day, Nina accepted a contract from a mafia organization. The target of the contract was Steve Fox, a world boxing champion. Nina infiltrated the tournament and set her sights on her new target.
Freeze! Freeze! Look out! Thanks.
Steve was a young British boxer enjoying his run as the middleweight champion of the world. Adopted during infancy, Steve sought the identity of his biological parents, as well as the origin of the scar on his arm. One day, Steve was ordered by a mafia group to throw a high-stakes fight, but he refused and instead won the fight. Unfortunately, the Mafia made good on their threats and put a price on Steve's head. With the Mafia in hot pursuit, Steve fled England for the United States and led a life on the run. But Steve soon realized that no matter what he did, the Mafia would eventually catch and kill him. He would never learn the truth of his past. Motivated by this realization, Steve sought the limelight once again and entered the King of Iron Fist tournament pool.
Freeze!
Starting with Steve Fox. The fact Nina was gunning for Steve but saved him here was interesting. It made one wonder, why did a woman clearly meant to kill him save him? But at the same time, it was also shown that Nina is his mother. Even if it was through artificial insemination while she was in cryosleep, he's still her mother. And perhaps she did care about him, even if her quiet demeanor meant she was unlikely to show it directly. Her actions, they spoke louder than her words. Now, with Nina's intro and ending, it's odd that the Syndicate outright told her what her relationship with him was. But realizing he's her own son leaves very complex emotions. She's used to being a cold-blooded assassin, and it's not like Steve was conceived legitimately. Yet, her compassionate side means she ultimately cannot do it, even if she would like to continue to be the cold woman that she often is. A part of her cares for him. She feels something for Steve, for whatever reason. Call it maternal instincts, who knows? I still find it funny her sniper vanishes in this moment right here, and she randomly has a pistol in the very next part of the cutscene. But in any case, Steve saves her too, and she even thanks him. This shows Nina as an emotionally complex individual that isn't just some cold, emotionless assassin, no matter how much she likes to act like one the rest of the time. Of course, later games completely fumbled this and ruined this storyline entirely, but we'll get there when we get there in the videos that follow. Next we get to Lei Wulong.
Lei's life was consumed by police work as usual. Unfortunately for Lei, his live-in girlfriend got fed up with his workaholic lifestyle and dumped him in favor of Lei's assistant. Lei was devastated. Around the same time, Lei botched an operation to bring a crime syndicate to justice. The failure cost the police force 2 years' worth of intense undercover investigation work. Lei's rivals in the force secretly reported to his superiors that he botched the operation by allowing personal affairs to affect his job performance. As a result, Lei wound up with a 1-month suspension. During his suspension, Lei learned from an informant that an assassin was hired by the syndicate to murder a certain boxer participating in the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4. Lei enters the tournament in hopes of redeeming his honor.
Freeze! Freeze!
Just as with the other two endings, Lei, aka Jackie Chan, basically, is targeting her. Ah, there's her sniper in this ending. Anyways, he follows her, and his goofy and lovable self, back then anyway, is chasing her. Just like the other endings, Steve saves her. Though in this one, Nina confesses to her client being the Mafia, and Lei becomes a hero. I don't see Nina as the type to crack so easily, but I get it. This ending's nice for Lei. All the same, apparently later games establish that none of these endings are canon. Instead, Nina supposedly felt nothing for Steve at all, and simply doesn't fire at him because the Mafia backs out. When we get to later Tekkens, it continues to double down on the idea that Nina truly does feel nothing for Steve at all, once again. Which leaves me saying, what was the point of showing all of this if you're not going to do anything with it? Ultimately, a completely wasted storyline. Also, what was with the veins on Steve's arm? I feel like that was going to be used to establish as him having some Mishima blood or something. But ultimately, it goes nowhere as well. Never even mentioned in later games. And I'm not sure if he even still has those veins on his arm after Tekken 5. And so, like I said, I'll go into more about those as the games go, but I thought I had to at least mention it a little here.
Bryan realized that the end of his life was near. There was only one person who could change this, Dr. Abel, his creator. But Abel abandoned him 2 years ago when the Mishima Zaibatsu recruited him as its top scientific advisor. Bryan despised the both of them, Mishima Zaibatsu for taking Abel away from him, and Abel himself for abandoning him. One day, news of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4 reached Bryan, and he decided to enter the tournament. Despite his impending death, Bryan's body flowed with energy, making him more powerful than before. Along with this new strength, Bryan developed an uncontrollable rage that manifested itself in his outward physical appearance. Bryan stakes everything on one hope, that if he defeats Heihachi Mishima, he would become the head of the Mishima Zaibatsu. If all goes according to plan, Bryan would command Abel to modify his body, thus becoming the most powerful being in existence once again.
Ah, you're finally awake. Have you any idea who saved you? He did. I'm certain you're wondering why. It's because we need your cooperation. By mechanizing you, I will extend your lifespan. In return, I will keep your original body. You see, the key to defeating Abel's bioweapon is contained within your body. Understand? Well, shall we get started then? This will be the start of a new future for you, as well as us. When you wake, it will feel as though only a moment has passed, but in reality, a year will have gone by. You will be completely reborn in a new body. All right? Well then, sweet dreams.
Bryan Fury. First, I'm gonna say, hear that laugh? That laugh? You know. Well, why did they get rid of that laugh, starting with Tekken 6?
You win!
No. What were they thinking? Hear this new laugh? Yeah. No. The old laugh was so much better. When can we get that old laugh back, Bamco? His ending showed kindness and compassion. Though, considering how much of a monster Bryan was known as even back then, I'm surprised Yoshimitsu was dumb enough to even try to save him. Now that brings us to Yoshimitsu and his ending.
As the leader of the Manji party, Yoshimitsu dedicated himself to providing food, medical assistance, and shelter to the ever-increasing number of political refugees around the world. Unfortunately, with a constant lack of necessary funding and manpower, Yoshimitsu was unsure about the future of his organization. When Yoshimitsu heard about the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4, he envisioned a union between the Manji party and the Mishima Zaibatsu. With this dream in his mind, Yoshimitsu decided to enter the tournament immediately. He must defeat Heihachi Mishima at any cost.
天網開会そうにしてもらさん
財務室中央金庫が破られました。万事島のヘリが金庫ごと。何？Yoshimitsu!
This goofball had a very serious side to him in this game, as Tekken 4 was a much more serious game than later ones in the series in general. Yet, his move list still showed his silly side, and this ending did as well in its own way. What I especially liked was how it showed the Manji party as essentially Robin Hood-esque characters, and made me curious to learn more about them. Eat him! When Heihachi said that, I loved that. So, just skipping the SH entirely, huh? And his way of supposedly saying, damn you! Or I remember teaching myself by watching this ending over and over back in the day how to say it. Now, with Christie Monteiro, I must...
Eddie Gordo learned capoeira from a master during his imprisonment. This master had a granddaughter named Christie. While in prison, Eddie swore an oath to him that he would pass on the art of capoeira to Christie. Shortly after returning from the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, Eddie took Christie under his wing and taught her the art of capoeira, just as he promised. She became an impressive fighter after 2 years of training. But Eddie left abruptly soon thereafter. Those responsible for my father's death must pay. His words were all that was left behind for Christie. Troubled by his sudden and mysterious disappearance, Christie pursued Eddie. Her only lead, the King of Iron Fist Tournament.
Great fight, Christie! Hey, Christie, can I get a shot? Congratulations, Christie! How do you feel? Anyone you want to share this victory with? So tell us, what was the key to your victory? Christie!
Eddie! Eddie! Eddie!
First say that Eddie Gordo is established to have lost his family due to Kazuya Mishima and was spending time in prison for it. And that's where he learned capoeira from Christie Monteiro's grandfather. Now, that brings us to Christie Monteiro and her hilarious ending. The lit bite here was cute in her ending, and the way she goes, Eddie! At the end always made me laugh because of how incredibly stupid her voice became in that moment. But that said, I loved her voice in this game in general a lot more than in Tekken 5. Listen to how she says "here we go" in Tekken 4 and then Tekken 5.
Here we go!
Here we go!
As you can see, she emotes a lot more in Tekken 4 than she does in 5. Something was lost. Something was lost. Of course, by now she speaks in her native tongue, but this was back when voice acting made sense. People spoke in Japanese to each other if that was their native language, and everyone else tended to use English when talking to each other, because that's the lingua franca of the world. the language you use in common to be able to talk with those of other languages. Unfortunately, starting with Tekken 5, and especially Tag 2, they dropped this, and everyone talks in their native tongue, regardless if it makes any sense whatsoever. But we'll get there when we get there. Also say that what they did with her hair was somewhat off in this game, which is likely why she had a ponytail in later games. Next is Kuma and Panda. These, I'll say, aren't that bad. These are often joke characters anyway, so... And before anyone points out, Xiaoyu speaks Japanese despite being Chinese, well, she spends her years in Japan, so I sort of let it slide. Though she should be bilingual between Chinese and Japanese, I imagine such a voice actress would be very hard to gain. So again, just let it slide. More or less, I'm probably not gonna cover Kuma nor Panda stories in this series. Why? Again, their endings aren't meant to be taken all that seriously anyway. And that's okay for these two characters. So I may or may not sometimes cover them a bit, but it won't be taken as seriously. Now, speaking of which, here we go to Xiaoyu's ending.
Xiaoyu was a junior at Mishima High School, but lacking any particular goals, Xiaoyu grew tired of her daily routine. One day, she received an anonymous email warning her of Heihachi's evil intentions and the dangers she faced. Though Xiaoyu replied to the email in hopes of an answer, she didn't receive any further messages. Xiaoyu's intuition told her that Jin, who had been missing since the last tournament, could be the sender. She believed in the message and began to distrust Heihachi and the Mishima Zaibatsu. Upon hearing the announcement of the next tournament, Xiaoyu decided to enter in hopes of being reunited with Jin and to unveil the truth behind Heihachi and the Mishima Zaibatsu.
やっシャオ、何やってんのよこんなとこで。何やってんのって仕事よ。仕事？座ってるだけじゃないの？みはるは大学どうなったの？大学？全部落ちた。そう。ねえみはる、うちの会社来ない？は？本気よ。会社ったって何すりゃいいのよ。実はね、みはると一緒にやりたいことあんのよ。何？私ね、これから自分の夢は自分の手で叶えようと思って。どうしちゃったの一体。試合が終わってジンに会ったの。何？結局会えたの？そんなこと全然教えてくんなかったじゃん。ジン、その時私に言ってくれたんだ。本当に叶えたい夢があるんなら自分で叶えろって。今は？ジンは？すぐ旅に出ちゃった。なるほど。悲しいお別れがあったわけね。何よ。でもシャオってさ、昔から人に頼ってばっかだったもんね。あんた変わったわ。それでこれから何やんの？あれ一緒に作って。
Miharu. She got largely forgotten in later games. I remember her. Honestly, I don't feel anything strongly one way or another about this ending, but I do like the idea that Xiaoyu displays her affection for Jin, and I hoped it'd lead to something interesting. That said, I also don't mind anytime she has a more silly ending either, as, well, that suits her. Also, here, her theme park idea is kind of sweet, as it's something she'd wanted in Tekken 3 as well. So, next is Hwoarang.
Back in his homeland of Korea, Hwoarang was drafted into the military and assigned to a Spec Ops unit. Although his success in various missions was highly regarded, his penchant for disobeying rules and orders gave his senior officers more than a few headaches. Hwoarang felt a strange emptiness within him. He recalled longingly of the days hustling money in street fights, the rush of hand-to-hand combat, and his fight against Jin Kazama. The military could not quell these yearnings. One day, the announcement of the next tournament reached Hwoarang's ears. For the first time in years, his blood began to stir. He would defeat Jin, Heihachi Mishima, and anyone else who dared to stand in his way of claiming Mishima's Zaibatsu as his own. Bursting with anticipation, Hwoarang slipped out from the military base and headed for the tournament.
You're finally here.
So, what do you want?
I never got to fight you at the tournament. I'll take you on right here, right now.
There's no reason to fight.
You ain't got one? Well, I do.
Sergeant! Desertion is an offense punishable by court-martial. Give yourself up, soldier!
Oi.
Fire!
Kazama, remember, I kicked your ass back there. Hey, you listening? I'll give you a chance to even the score at the next tournament. You better show up.
Ceasefire!
I'm gonna say that I've always loved this rivalry and feel they could have done a bit more with it. Tekken 4 showed a good start to it. I also love that they both speak English here because, again, that would be the way that they'd understand each other. He's Korean and Jin is Japanese. They don't speak each other's language, so they would need to speak English. This just makes more sense from a story perspective, rather than everyone speaking their native languages at each other. Wait, what? Is everyone supposed to be a polyglot? Again, though this ending is really fun, and I love how it builds up the rivalry between the two, I do notice this contrast that later games will get to it. Though the Korean military shooting at them is ridiculous a bit. But I find it fun, and let's face it, later games will get way more ridiculous than this one. Alright, next is Julia Chang.
Realizing that her native homeland would soon be in danger of the encroaching desert, Julia began her research on ecosystem restoration in hopes of saving it. The research group she joined was funded exclusively by G Corporation. In fact, all research was conducted at G Corporation's maximum security labs, and all data was stored there as well. However, one day the project was placed on indefinite hold. The Mishima Zaibatsu had attacked G Corporation's maximum security labs and stolen all the research data. Julia neither knew nor cared about the Mishima Zaibatsu, but in order to prevent her home from becoming a desert in a few years' time, she had to retrieve the research data. Julia searched the net for information on the Mishima Zaibatsu. Her eyes lit up when she saw a webpage announcing the King of Iron Fist tournament for
Genicell was the key. When you attempt to combine the devil and human, the devil cells destroy the human cells, making it impossible to create a viable life form. But when you introduce Genicell, the biological purifying qualities of the Genicell can suppress the devil cell. Remarkable, isn't it? Join us in our research.
This research will be the end of mankind!
What are you doing? Stop! No! Do you want to destroy your dreams of reforestation? You're destroying the future of mankind.
You're wrong! How can that be our future? A world where such horrible things exist?
Stupid woman!
One day, I will reforest this land. I swear it.
Okay, sorry to interrupt the video. I know that this is way out of context, but I gotta say it before I forget it. While I was in the middle of editing this portion of the video, I suddenly had a thought. What if Genicell from this scene is why Reina exists in Tekken 8? Okay, because think about it. Combining Ogre cells with the Devil Gene's cells and creating a viable life form, maybe Reina plays a part in it. I mean, it would be weird, wouldn't it? If Reina... Maybe I'm just being weird. I don't know. But this idea that Heihachi wanted access to the Devil Gene cells and mix them with his own cells and those of Ogre. Okay, so, hear me out on this. What if he removed the Ogre element? Let's say he couldn't get Ogre's cells currently. Well, his first step towards that could be the fact that his own cells, Heihachi's, mixed with the Devil Gene, could be in Reina. So basically, by taking the Devil cells that he got with this whole Genicell thing, and mix it with his own cells, Heihachi's, it would be the first step towards this whole Genicell thing. I don't know, maybe my mind's going somewhere weird. I don't know, we'll go back to the video. I might be spitting something, or I might be just crazy. I don't know where my mind was going with that, but I don't know. Theory crafting? I don't know, we'll go back to the video. Another one that has a promising start with this game. Her story was quite interesting. The restoration part was so-so. I didn't care as much about that. I mean, honestly, the fact that Arizona even had a forest kind of surprised me to begin with. But anyway, what I loved is what it led to. This Genocell introduction, and how it could merge the Devil Gene with Ogre's cells. I was eager to see where this storyline would go, and it upset me that it never went anywhere. Man, this ending was exciting. See? These are the kinds of storylines we're missing out on these days with later Tekken entries. I will say that reforesting Arizona is a rather odd idea, considering that it hasn't had a forest since prehistoric times. So why though? But that felt odd to me to begin with. Now, next is Li Xiaolan's ending.
Violet was the majority shareholder and de facto leader of a manufacturer for humanoid robots. He was apparently a fighter in the past, but now lived a quiet life in a mansion in the Bahamas. Bored by his carefree lifestyle, Violet decided to enter the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4. There was another significant reason for his entry into the tournament. Violet believed that he could turn his humanoid robots into the ultimate fighting weapons. He believed in a utopian world where inorganic humanoids would carry out the will of their human masters. Violet accelerated the development of a prototype for the tournament. If completed in time, the tournament would be an excellent PR opportunity. Violet's mind was filled with visions of them. 20 years ago, Lee was expelled from the Mishima Zaibatsu when he betrayed Heihachi and sided with Kazuya at the King of Iron Fist Tournament 2. Thoughts of revenge consumed Lee for a long time, but eventually he realized that it was pointless to kill an old man who probably only had a few years left in his life at best. With that epiphany, Lee distanced himself from fighting and moved to a mansion in the Bahamas to lead a solitary life. One day, he discovered a huge sell-off of G Corporation's stock. Lee's intuition told him that something happened within the company. His intuition was correct. The Mishima Zaibatsu attacked G Corporation and caused significant damage to their research facilities. He also learned that the Mishima Zaibatsu was searching for a critical component needed to complete one of their projects. Oddly enough, an announcement was made for the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4 around the same time. Lee's fading passion for fighting was rekindled, along with his resentment towards the Mishima clan. Lee decides to enter the tournament under disguise in order to prevent the Mishima Zaibatsu from discovering his true identity.
Thank you! Thank you all! Thank you for your applause. But winning the tournament was not my ultimate goal. I participated in the tournament to gather test data for Combot and to promote its application as the ultimate fighting machine. I present to you now Combot! Combot! Give these nice folks a little demonstration. Damn it.
Mr. Lee? The new Combot prototype is finished, sir.
This one better work to spec.
Yes, combat experiments were conducted against Heihachi. 10.23 seconds into the experiment, Combot unleashed a 50-hit combination. Heihachi was completely helpless.
Excellent.
Now, I loved Li Xiaolon here and his angle of moving on from the Mishimas. Instead, he has Combot. Do I like combat? Sorry, do I like Combot? Not exactly. What I more of admire here is that Li is trying to live his own life. He's willing to fight the Mishimas to do what is right, but he also wants to have his own life and do his own thing. He doesn't continue to hold as tightly to his grudges of old. Even if he, no doubt, has some mixed feelings based on those days that are very understandable. He's not consumed by a desire to get revenge or get as tightly wound up about the Mishimas. And I also love his voice in this game more than in later games, honestly. It's like he decided to actually learn how to speak English fluently. Though I admit, his lack of Japanese makes it mixed. Still, I love how suave he was in this game, and I prefer it more than his goofy side in later games, though his goofy side does still amuse me in those games, and we'll get to those. Now, Marduk's ending.
Undefeated for 4 years in the professional circuit, Craig Marduk was once a respected and feared Vale Tudo fighter. However, Craig was expelled from the professional ranks after being linked to a minor scandal. Bitter against his peers and society, Craig's wrath consumed his soul. One day, Craig started a bar brawl in Arizona and killed an opponent during the fight. Convicted of second-degree manslaughter, Craig was sentenced to 10 years in the state penitentiary. 2 years later, Craig was mysteriously released from prison. Some anonymous benefactor had apparently paid off numerous judiciaries to arrange for Craig's release. An envelope was delivered to Craig shortly thereafter. It contained a plane ticket and a newspaper article about the King of Iron Fist Tournament Tour.
Craig Marduk? It is you. I used to watch your fights on TV all the time. I'm Jeff Slater, the current Val 2 champion. Hey, has the ex-champ forgotten how to fight? Come on, Marduk, bring it on. It'll be the biggest unofficial bout of the century. The badass reigning champ versus the legend who disappeared in the wake of a scandal. All running away, huh? Afraid to see legendary fighter KO'd in the headlines?
Don't bother getting up.
Seeing this version of Marduk was much cooler than in any of the later games. He was less of a Steven Goldberg and more of just this big, hairy, tough guy. And I laughed during this ending. Boom! Headbutt! This ending just, it always worked for me. Partially because there were enough other good storylines and Marduk was still new. He had less reason to have a serious story yet. Yet here, he remained serious, and it was a funny as hell ending.
Paul went undefeated through the entire King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, and even triumphed over Ogre. Swelling with pride, Paul returned home. However, unknown to Paul, Ogre morphed into his second form, True Ogre, and the tournament continued after his departure. Although Paul claimed that he was the true champion of the King of Iron Fist Tournament 3, few believed him. And even those who did eventually grew tired of his attitude. Eventually, his dojo went out of business from the lack of students. One day, Paul spotted a newspaper flyer announcing the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4. Burning with desire to win this tournament, Paul decided to put his reputation on the line and prove once and for all that he was the one true champion. He proclaimed, "This time, I'll be the undisputed champion."
All right, let's take a cab.
Paul! Hey, Paul! Paul!
Ain't my style.
Paul's ending. Ah, here we go. This was Paul at his absolute best. It all goes downhill from here in later games. I feel like we never got to see the true Paul. Here, he felt like he'd become a poser and wanted to be something more. But notice also here, he won the tournament and had beat Ogre, not even knowing about True Ogre, whom Jin beat in Tekken 3. Now this shows that Paul was someone truly special. Look at him here. This showed a sign. Paul could be a real character, and not just a walking punchline. He seemed like a potential badass. I also loved his hair in this game, and what they did in Tekken 8 missed the entire point. They tried to give him a different hair, but they did it wrong, and it was much better here. Now, if you want his other hair, use what they did in this game, Barada, not the Karen haircut in Tekken 8. Now, the Paul we got in this ending made me interested in Paul, and wanted to see more of him. This is merely a sneak peek into the Paul Phoenix that I'm actually interested in.
Armor King was murdered. King swore upon Armor King's grave that he would seek revenge against the man responsible for his mentor's death. The murderer was serving time in an Arizona state penitentiary. With the money he earned from professional wrestling tournaments, King arranged for the murderer's release. King then sent him a plane ticket and an article about the King of Iron Fist Tournament 4. With his plans in motion, King headed for the tournament to await his sworn enemy, the Vale Tudo fighter.
King showed a great deal of complexity in this game. He wished to avenge his master, Armor King, and then he saw it. Oh, Marduk is a fan of his own. King just couldn't do it. King isn't a monster. He's a pro wrestler and a jaguar master, sure, but he's a man. He even feels ashamed he was going to finish Marduk off. This would lead to an interesting rivalry in the next game. I'm really glad they follow up on this in later games.
Martial Law was a successful businessman. He managed a newly established dojo and owned a successful nationwide Chinese fast food chain called Martial China. Unfortunately, he lost a franchise war against a competing restaurant chain and had to declare bankruptcy a year later. Unable to cope with failure, Marshall fell into depression and spent his days at home on his couch in a drunken haze. Then one day, a notice for the tournament arrived at his doorstep. Marshall's eyes flashed with renewed vigor. After a month of intense training, he beat himself back into top physical form. This is it, he said to himself. It's all or nothing. The fire within him raged hotter than ever before.
Man, the food here sucks!
We have to pay for this? What did you just say?
You heard me, I said this food sucks! You expect us to eat this stuff?
What do you mean it sucks?
This pepper beef is too damn spicy!
What are you talking about? This is good. No. Put more anger into it. Yeah, that's more like it. Lower your stance a bit more and...
Martial Law's ending. Here we go. I've always loved this ending. It also showed real depth to his character, both in the intro and ending. He wasn't some shallow character who hates rich people. He was a martial artist and a chef. Yeah, okay, he was a bit down on his luck at times, but he had character. With his own life, trying to make ends meet. He had financial problems, sure, but that meant he understood what it was like to be poor or in need. It had nothing to do with hating those who have when he has not. It was more about working through what he lacks and making up for it. Overall, I found this ending really fun. Law's definitely another character whom I don't mind having silly endings or silly storylines if it fits him. It just needs to. But you have to do them right. That's the biggest thing. Now, Combot.
Combot is a general-purpose humanoid robot, unlike any other developed to date. Its powerful learning AI enables it to perfectly mimic any human motion, captured on its mocap sensor arrays. This ability makes Combot suitable for a wide range of applications, anything from household tasks to military duty. This particular unit was customized for hand-to-hand combat. The developer's plan called for Combot to memorize each type of fighting style as it progressed through the tournament. result would be the most powerful hand-to-hand fighter on Earth. Unfortunately, the project failed to meet its deadline, and a few bugs remain in Combot's memory subsystems. This prevents Combot from executing more than one person's fighting style each time it is powered up.
You did well, Combot. Now, the world is mine for the taking.
Honestly, I like Mokujin more, but Combot wasn't bad per se. The ending is quite funny here though. Heihachi spank followed by the king outro. Overall, this game was a lot of fun. Nostalgic memories. But if this is the story of how great Tekken 4 is, you must know there are ups and downs in this series, especially for Tekken 5. Now, at first, these were going to be... well, I think I'm still going to make them separate videos. I was gonna merge Tekken 5 into Tekken 4, but I feel like maybe they are better off as separate videos. All I'm going to say is that Tekken 4 is more about the story, and it has the best story in the series until arguably Tekken 8. While Tekken 5 started introducing the gameplay the series, well, returned to form, but also improving upon it. While Tekken 4's gameplay had a lot of problems. A lot. First, Tekken 4 has a small roster. I definitely prefer a larger one, but I'd take a tight storyline like this one over that any day. Next, the gameplay wasn't that great. I love the walls, but they did lead to balance issues, and the uneven terrain even more so led to balance issues. My main in the game, Jin Kazama, completely broken in this game. Destroyed everyone. But even the way the game felt gameplay-wise was slower and doesn't feel quite right when going back to it. That's the issue with Tekken 4. From a gameplay perspective, it's the worst game in the series. But from a story perspective, arguably Tekken 8, but other than that game, no game, not Tekken 5, not Tekken 6, certainly not Tekken 7, none of them topped the story in Tekken 4. Until again, arguably Tekken 8, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Anyway, please let me know how I did on this video. This is my first time making edited content like this, and I really want to keep going, but I want to know what you guys think. So leave a comment telling me how I did, what your thoughts on the Tekken series is, and especially Tekken 4. And, you know, like and subscribe if you want to see more. I hope to see you guys soon. Bye!